Welcome to SchezzWho, your top spot for politics. And it's been a minute since I've done an interview show. Glad you guys are tuning in. And ignore the sounds of the playing cats in this room. And I'll try to catch this light if they knock it over. So I hope they enjoy themselves and hope you guys enjoy yourselves for watching this great political content and this interview tonight with a great Virginia candidate. Now, I want to shout out that which gets this show going, which is, of course, I'm starting off with the Dissent Agenda. That's a new podcast out in the Hampton Roads area, primarily from Virginia Beach, hosted by Melissa Lucason and Cody Connor. And they also run the StreamYard account with which I do SchezzWho out. So definitely go to the Dissent Agenda on YouTube, hit subscribe for them. Now, if you need insurance, then you need to call Mr. Farley Perkins, 757-271-6655. He'll help you out with your insurance needs. Let's say you need a good dinner, southern-based food, then I would suggest Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express over at Portsmouth Boulevard, which is near where I live and where I used to live, across from Regent University in Virginia Beach, is another Ellen's Homestyle Barbecue Express location. And if you want to have some sweet treats after that, ELG Sweet Boutique on High Street in Portsmouth. My good friend, Mr. Seiko Bonner, runs Positive Vibes Incorporated. He can help you a lot of monetary ways, from credit fixes to tax resolutions. He is also a great DJ. So if you're looking for some entertainment and a good host to a party, Mr. Seiko Bonner will help you out. His number right there on the screen. And of course, don't forget the Black Swan Mindset, the Chronicles podcast, run by my awesome, lovely, talented, smart, brilliant wife, Andrea Dixon Chesviner. Also on Substack, so look that up too, so you can follow up to date with all the new Black Swan podcast episodes. Now tonight, I'm going to be bringing on a special guest, part of a special election. That would be Mr. John Thomas, who is running in, I believe, every time you see me do this, that's me getting ready to catch what might be a light about to fall. So you're in a state Senate, if I recall, special election. What I would like you to do, good sir, is first tell us a little bit about that district, what cities it represents, and just some cool stuff, features about that district.
Good for having me on. Thanks, Conrad. So I'm John Thomas, the Republican nominee for Senate District 15 here in Chesterfield County and parts of Richmond. My district that I'm running in is got 34 precincts in Chesterfield County, and then about 14 in the city of Richmond. We have a diverse popularity in Chesterfield County, from Hispanics to blacks to whites, Asians. It's a good mix. I've lived in the county pretty much my entire life until I worked for the government, and then I was gone for a little bit out of the state. But I've been here my entire life, and I just want to make sure that we have a fair representation for this district.
Now, what I like to do often when I have on guests who are running in cool Virginia districts and such is for them to tell me a little bit about their favorite things regarding that district. Say your favorite businesses or restaurants to hang out, perhaps some organizations in that district which you really want to shout out because they mean a lot to you. So what are your favorite things about that district?
A lot of the restaurants, we go to are the local ones that are mom and pops. You've got a great barbecue place that's right off of Route 10 and trying to think of where it is. It's right off of Route 10 in Centralia. Sibley's Barbecue, great barbecue there, mom and pop shop. We've got King's Barbecue right at the Chesterfield County Airport, which is about 4 miles from the house. And the two local restaurants I like to go to for Italian is Belle Ital, which is right off of Route 10. And then the other one is going to be in Meadowdale Shopping Center, which is Pino's, which has been there for many years when my grandma's shop was there in that area.
Cool stuff. Now, this is a special election. So tell us a little bit how that came to be. What candidate was in this district, left to do what, and what generated your interest in wanting to run for it?
So with the election that we just had, the current sitting senator was Hashmi, who, as you know, won for the lieutenant governor spot. So once she won that, she had to give up her seat, which also put in a special election for her seat for Senate District 15. And then that opened up for us to go ahead and have this. I was debating on what I wanted to do for a little while. I had about 3 weeks off because I just ran in the House of Delegates in the 76. And once that was over, had 3 weeks. Then I was like, we have another shot. I'm in the district. They didn't have anybody. So I went ahead and, threw my name in the hat. And here I am, the candidate for the district.
Now, if I recall, I went over to VPAP a little bit, studying up for State Senate District 15. It says on VPAP that it's strong Democratic, but of course that's not going to stop anyone who really wants to run. So tell a little bit about the district and how you're pursuing it. I understand that you're doing a lot of canvassing. So let's say you're knocking on the door of a house, and what might be the general gist of a conversation that you usually have with a voter that you see?
So when I'm going up to the doors, knocking on the door, the first thing we say is my name. Hi, I'm John Thomas. I'm the Republican candidate for Senate District 15. Were you aware that we have a special election on January the 6th? And a lot of people that I've knocked did not realize we had a special election. So we went into why we had it, what the process is, and then the meaning for what this seat actually does. And a lot of it is, we can stop some of the unconstitutional amendments that are getting ready to come through, especially the redistricting, to get, a tripartisan agreement that we all wanted to have citizens draw our lines and not politicians. The Democrats wanted to go ahead and take and draw their own lines for their own political gain, where we need fair representation across the entire state of Virginia. And then we go into all that. I have my nice little palm card. I don't think I have one with me. I know I've got plenty in the truck, but we had those out, handing out literature and just going throughout the week. It seemed like people on Sunday knew a lot more about the election than they did previous days.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there were some local television spots that may have highlighted it and really boosted some of that?
I've had a very strong text message campaign. I've also had a very strong phone canvassing where they've done phone baking from the Virginia Senate to local GOPs to actually the entire state of Virginia is actually behind this with their GOPs. Loudoun County is helping out down where you're at in the Tidewater regions, helped out. Mm-hmm. Out in the Midwest of Virginia. Everyone is back pretty much this campaign from all over the state.
And, for the sake of your running, I do hope you're getting a decent or perhaps overly decent amount of help from the state party, because I just don't like seeing people left on the vine or something like that. But this is a special election, which is tomorrow. Do you think going into this maybe a month ago, over 20% in the district even knew it was coming?
I don't even think 20% realized it. I think more is about probably, I would say 10%, because we just came out of election and then this happened and it wasn't really publicized. The, Democratic side had their firehouse primary, which was a very low turnout. I don't think it wasn't even more than 1,500 people showed up for the firehouse for the Democratic side. And right now for early polling, we had 3,555 for SchezzWho County and less than 1,000 in the city of Richmond that already voted.
And it's a good thing, I guess, being in that particular district, which includes so much of the city of Richmond, that assuming you have a great day tomorrow and win, you won't have to travel that far in order to go to the General Assembly, to which case, if I had won in Portsmouth, then I'd have at least 2 hours to drive out there. So that's pretty cool. This is a special election, but that doesn't mean that you're distanced from very recent political topics. Like you said, you even ran for the House, and now you're running for the state Senate. I think that there are some recent constitutional amendments that may have been either run for last election might be proposed very soon. I believe that might matter. What could you tell us about some Virginia-based constitutional amendments that may be being spoken about soon or on the table now that you might be able to influence by being a member?
So the biggest one, as we all been talking about, is the constitutional amendment change for the redistricting. 67% of Virginians, back in 2000, I was one of those individuals who voted that we wanted citizens to draw the lines. That is up for election now. That was pushed through the House. That was in that special session that was right before election, even though when they ran this special election for, not a special election, special session, it was actually already in voting, and they said it was their midterm, but, hundreds of thousands of Virginians had already early voted, so they were already deep into the 45 days of voting for this session, and they called it the midterm. Then they actually did the other thing that wasn't very wise, was no circuit court in Virginia had any paperwork displayed or hard copy about these amendments. And that's the second thing that, with this amendment is they're trying to push through. The other one is the restoration of rights for felons. Basically, once they get out of jail, no matter what their felony was, it would be where they would have their rights restored immediately. That would be a problem, especially if it was a violent crime. They could actually get out. If they got out on early parole, the next day they could go out, buy a firearm, no problems, and then go and do harm or go do something else. And then the other one is, what was it? The abortion one. They have that in there, and then the gay marriage is to repeal that. With
That's
all those,
if I'm counting so far.
Yep.
That's
it's HJ1 through HJ4 are the House bills that went through.
Now, you are John Thomas, the Republican candidate. Would you like to use this opportunity to take 4 positions on those special amendments?
With all those, with the split for the Senate, if we can flip the seat, it would be a 20-20 in the Senate, which means we'll have 20 Democrats to 20 Republicans. And how we voted on that, if we vote right down the middle on 2020, the lieutenant governor will not have a vote in those constitutional amendments, and those constitutional amendments will be completely eradicated for that session. It's a big thing because fair representation with Virginia, and if we lose the seat and it goes to a Democratic seat and they vote these amendments in, it's just gonna hurt Virginia in so many different ways, from families to representation in the, congressional districts. I know you're running in one. Congratulations for your candidacy on that. And it will just basically move everything to full Democratic control, where we can't get any fair representation for anybody. And that's for any party, not just, the independents, the Democrats, the Republicans, or the Libertarians. Mm-hmm. It will be basically one-sided all the way through.
Now, this is where I might interject a little bit of my own opinion on the matter. Now, over half a year ago, when the Republicans nationwide weren't trying to shift a couple of states such as Texas to doing similar processes, then I would have had a similar position that I would be against Virginia trying to do this type of thing. It seems like it's a response to some Republican efforts, but nonetheless, I think I've seen some of the Virginia possible maps that included 10 Democrat-leaning districts and 1 Republican-leaning district, to which case I think what that does is sort of dilute the strength of such a district toward that particular party. It might be closer to 50+1 as opposed to 55 in such a district. So let's say I was running in Virginia 2. I'm running in Virginia 2. What it would do is make it a little bit less, well, especially now because it's a little bit Republican leaning, hence with Kagan being in office. But that would be, say, a little bit Democrat leaning, but not as much as, say, 3, which is where Bobby Scott's currently in, which is heavily dense Democrat district. It might bring it a little bit closer to the center, which means Republicans would be more competitive in those things, even though it would be projected that the Democrats usually win. But that means if Republicans in that type of district statewide get a big old momentum, a red wave going, they might sweep 10 of those things because it seems a little closer to 50. At least that's just a projection that it would have on that. But that's just the first of those amendments. Would you like to take positions on the other three?
The other three, I would still vote against those because we've had them in the books for a year right now, and they have not hurt anybody. And we just need to make sure we have fair representation with everyone, including our gays and all. They have their rights too, just like everyone else. And I wouldn't want to infringe on their rights either.
That is where you and I would actually have an agreement, even though we might be quite politically different. The idea that just letting the government step back off from that type of regulation is one that I would join you in. How about the concept of transparency and whether or not that this racist effort and the amendment sometimes seems a little rushed? Is there a lack of transparency in that process that you believe exists?
I believe so, because they pushed this through so quick in the House because they had the majority, so they were able to push it through because they were leaning Democrat. So they pushed it through for the special session just to get it on the books for the mid-year so they can vote on it. That's already voted for their side for the House. So now it goes to the Senate. So they're hoping they can keep the Senate as a majority for them to go ahead and pass it again through that. And then we as constituents would end up have to voting on it on, I believe it's April that they wanted to push this through an election on April. I think that's what it was, but it could be a little bit further out. But I think it's within the next 4 to 5 months they want to push this through to have it completely in the books for Virginians.
I do want to put a comment up on the screen that I've gotten from the YouTube channel. Individuals watching, LPMV2407 says, I support the least partisan method for drawing Virginia's congressional districts, which on paper was the post-2020 way they did it, which it seems like was borderline completely nonpartisan at all, which that seems like the better way if you're trying to remove the most partisan aspects. Not as much leaning Democrat, not as much leaning Republican, just toward representation. So I would, in principle, support that too. Now, as a Portsmouth citizen, you wouldn't be representing me, but there could be interests for me, a Portsmouth citizen, that you could be supporting or not, such as the fact that I have to, most of the time, avoid going through the downtown and midtown tunnel because I want to avoid those blasted tolls. I have proposed the idea that the Virginia General Assembly just buy out that contract and that there would be no tolls, but I'm the rank Democrat in the room here, so progressive Democrat. So what would be your take on you in the General Assembly attacking something like very onerous tolls?
Well, there's like here in Chesterfield County and parts of Richmond, we've had the Pole White Express that's been there for years, and I say years, and they just increased the toll from 90 cents to $1. Unless you have your smart tag, then you still have it at the 90 cents. But from what I understand, that toll has been paid for years, and we're still paying on it. That's something we could probably abolish too and get rid of it. They just recently did the Coleman Bridge, which you no longer have to pay a toll against that bridge. And I could see that's something we could work on and try to get that pushed through, because some of these roads, like you say, have been there for years. And when I say years, I mean, you look at the Nickel Bridge that's been there since my parents were born, back in the 50s, and we're still paying on that bridge for tolls. It's like, when can we stop with the tolls? I see like in northern states, they have tolls out of nowhere. Once we pass the Chesterfield County line, we don't see no more tolls until you get down to Newport News and Virginia Beach area. And I could see where we could probably be able to get some of these tolls abolished, because do we really need to pay those? Because we're already paying road tax on fuel. We pay tax for if you have a energy efficient or a fuel efficient vehicle, you pay road tax when you buy your tags. So there's taxes that go to the roads. Do we really need to pay more taxes or more, tolls for taxes, roads, or, to go and fix these? And then, you have the other ones that really don't maintain the roads that these funds go to.
I like the sound of that. As someone who would like them to see, they're inherently regressive. It's harder on someone like myself, a working individual who travels out of the city in order to get to work. That is the type of stuff that it really presses down on a person's wallet. And there are other aspects of things that press down on a person's wallet, such as utility bills. That's not even prior to 2024. That was something that was on people's minds because we see it every month. It's a cost every month. It just seems to be more costly and more costly, faster than our ability to have wages rise to keep up with it. So, how would you, as a state senator that by winning would make it 2020, would address something like Dominion Energy and other things like offshore wind projects, which was not a Virginia thing that stopped it. It was a national thing that stopped it. What would you advocate for on those things?
Well, with energy, we know that's a big thing that's going on. Everyone's trying to figure out how to make, more energy efficient. Just have to look into it more in depth. I haven't gotten too much into the energy. My background is more into the grocery retail part of it. I've seen everything from the increase of products going from, the early 2000s to where they are now. I see that increase quite a bit, which hurts everyone's pocket when you have to pay, 3 to 4 times the amount we did back in 2020 for it, where that goes into the whole thing with energy, where we have to produce energy to be able to, get products to one place to the other, to be able to, keep our food, safe in the refrigerator, to be able to do basic functions like have hot water and all. So I think we could look into that and see what options are there the best support everybody, and that would be looking into it more in depth once I got into the Senate.
Which the election is literally tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Then you would have a week before it starts. If I recall, it's the second Wednesday in January that the General Assembly begins, so less than a week before you need to get ready to do it. At least you don't have to travel that far. But you do have to have a staff. Do you think within a week or so you'll be ready to get the ball rolling?
I would hope so. I've got, a couple of the local senators for this area that I've been talking to, and I'm pretty sure I can get what I need pretty quickly with some help from current setting senators and make sure I'm on the right path. Because as you say, it's quick. Once it goes on the 6th, the 14th is when the General Assembly goes back into session.
There are other important things. For instance, I know Virginia might tackle the way we do right to work, whether or not it's entirely scrapped or not. I know in the election, Governor-elect Spanberger was running on the idea that she might tinker with it, not throw it out, which may be a completely different thing if it's a much bigger, and it is a much bigger now, 64 seats in the House are Democrats now. Is that leaning you to suspect that they might try a little harder to get right to work out of Virginia? And if you were in there, what position would you take and possible vote would you take on that matter?
Well, I can speak from experience. I have worked in a union before, and when I worked in that union, they did not do anything for me. I can see where certain unions for certain things can be, but with everything, no, I don't see that being something we need to change in the books. Because I know, talking to people I know with my company I work for, we oppose the unions or anything like that because we want our associates to have their money and not pay their money to another entity and then say the whatever union you had goes bankrupt and completely dissolves. If you pay into your pension and all, you just lost it all. You don't get any of it back. And that's what a lot of people don't understand with unions. And then the right to work, having that gone, they can force you into stuff that you do not want to do as a constituent or a associate of said business. And I can actually see where it would hurt mom and pop shops because they have limited staff. If they have, say 3 people and 2 of them want a union, guess what? They have a union.
And for the sake of a little bit of transparency, not only you giving your position, my position would be, to get rid of right to work, as right to work states seem to have a little bit less adjusted for state by state comparison wages, and working conditions tend to be a little bit less on average for right to work states. So that would be my position on the matter. What about, say, gun rights? Do you think gun rights might be something on the table fairly soon with a heavy Democrat House and a Democrat governor?
Yes, that is definitely on the table. They are already starting to look into all that and pushing out gun bills like they always do. I am pro 2A. I've been around firearms most of life. I actually worked in firearm compliance work with ATF compliance for looking at the state forms and federal forms and doing background checks. So I know that side of the field a lot more than a regular person. And I can see where if they do what they want to do, like, the ban capacity on, anything that has more than 10 rounds. There's so many people in Virginia that have, as we would call, standard capacity magazines, which would have more than 10 rounds, would become felons overnight. And that's law-abiding citizens for everyone that has it. And that's not just me. That could be people that are actually in a state seat, or you look at, military and law enforcement. All these people would become felons, how they want to write the law, like the last couple. And then you look at, the modern sporting rifle, and then you look at, they're talking about, these so-called fully semi-automatic, which doesn't exist. It's just semi-automatic. But with the state of Virginia, we can have full auto weapons, but they are so heavily regulated. It's not funny. So anything made after 1986 has to be on the register list to be able to be transferred. And just if you can get like the strip lower for a M4 or M16, that lower just by itself with no parts are going to cost you anywhere between $14,000 and $20,000, and not including the tax stamp you have to have. And then you have to register it with the state police.
And I would like to shout out the comment here that we have on the screen for YouTube. For it says $1 for delegate, but I would like to remind Ms. Dollar, former guest of SchezzWho, by the way, it should say $1 for Congress now, because she is also running, though in Virginia's 3rd district against Bobby Scott as the Libertarian nominee. In that race, so look out for $1 for Congress. But she did ask about the biggest issues around the Second Amendment that you see in 2026 and 2027. You did give your answers on that. I personally don't think much will come of it, because this is where I get to do. I even separate myself from other Democrats on this. A lot of even some radical progressives are still ardent individual gun rights activists, and I just gave up on that a while ago. But that's me. That's not the rest of the progressive Democrats. I usually think, especially because Virginia's Democrats tend to be a little more toward the center, that they might bring it up, that they might want to do it, and it ends up being something along the lines of like more background checks or something like that. That's where it will end up being, and a lot of them will fail. That's where I project it going. But that's just on guns. What about the idea of that they might change stuff regarding education in the state of Virginia? Do you have any fears that Democrats might do X, Y, or Z? And B, do you have any ideas you would want to put forth regarding education, being a potential state senator?
I do see them changing some of the stuff with the parental rights on how a parent can teach their kids if they want to do homeschool or not. I can see that being in the works. We should have our parents make the choices if they want their kids to be homeschooled, go through private school, or through a public school. I definitely see that coming down the pipeline. Don't know when, but I'm pretty sure that will happen. And then the other part of that is, we got to make sure our students are up to speed. If I remember correctly, our students in Virginia are like last in math. I've seen some of my nephew's math questions that he's done, and it's looking like some, college level trigonometry they're doing, not the simple math that we did when we were in school, which is easy. I just see that being one of those things. And then the standards of learning, they're trying to make sure that, everyone's on the same page with the standard of learning. But when you have a special needs student that has an IEP or is, challenged in some way, they're putting them at the same level as a student who's in an A+ class. Where these students that are in special needs, they're in that class for a reason. They have special needs because they can't do certain things, and they're being held to that same standard, where they're now have one where they can do a different test that helps them. I forgot what it was called, but that's one of the ones that they're trying to remove from the curriculum.
I'm also a bit concerned about the natural aspects of the state of Virginia. Of course, I live out here in Portsmouth and Tidewater, so that it's very low-lying, flat, very marshy, borderline swampish type of situation that floods very easily, and of course, we'd be suspect 200 years hence rising sea levels. And we also have a problem with subsidence, where the land's actually going down, and of course, we also have a lot of military. Land that's in the area. So we had to be concerned about that. You'd be representing, I think, closer to the start of the James River as it goes through Richmond and such, which empties out in our area, but it's the Piedmont. So it's a different, a little bit more rocky type of geography. And I had a guest who was on the show before, Pete Barlow, who's running for Congress in Virginia's 6th district. That's the Shenandoah. And that is a completely different type of geography itself, but we would all be mindful of ways to want to protect it. Do you think you would bring a little bit of a possible environmentalist bend, or is that something that Republicans want to do a little bit more hands off of, and maybe you stand apart?
I think we should always look at protecting the environment with everything, because this is one planet, we all have to live on it. Where I'm at, I'm pretty sure we are about 65 feet above sea level here in the Chesterfield County area where I live. We do have the Port of Richmond. That's right here, not far from where I live, right across from where DuPont is off of 95. But definitely, looking at that, we've got to make sure we're putting our wastewater right correctly, protecting those streams. So I could see where we can help out on that. We just have to take it by case and get all the facts before we'd go and jump into something.
All right. I would like to put this on the screen. Another good comment from LP MV2407. Would you be open to supporting Defend the Guard legislation that would prohibit the president from deploying Virginia National Guard troops to a war zone without a congressional declaration of war? And that's very relevant to this past year, where a couple of guardsmen, unfortunately, were killed in Syria. And again, they were guardsmen. They were not standard army troops. So do you like ideas like that?
With that, I mean, at the end of the day, I know that some of the guardsmen, even though they are with the state, they actually serve at the federal level too during certain things. But I know that recently everyone's like complaining that, hey, federally they did this, but we can only control what happens in the state of Virginia. For me to do anything outside of the state of Virginia, we have to go to our congressmen or congresswomen or our our U.S. Senate to represent us in that, because we can only control what's in our backyard. That's the biggest thing. And a lot of people like, I hear, my opponent talking about going after, federal stuff as a state legislator. And once you're in the state level, you have to deal with your state stuff and not your federal stuff. Federal stuff is handled by our congressional districts and our U.S. Senate. Those would be more of a question for those people to do, because that is on their level. Now the state, we can help out with the state guard, as in what happens in the state. But once they get to that federal being activated, that's on a federal level. That's not at a state level anymore.
That's true. The pros and cons of federalism here, whether or not the national government should have that much control. Maybe it seems a little loose as a concept, maybe outdated, of a National Guard if troops that are supposed to be more for Virginia become something that is nationalized. But then again, in our history, we have seen it have a a pro, which would be like sending National Guard troops to integrate schools, to a con being like going overseas and possibly facing issues. And another con, again, this is my side of the aisle, uh, having a complaint of National Guard being used in American cities, which seemingly to police American citizens, which I don't want to lay that at the feet specifically of yourself, but it is something that was of top down the Republican Party. And again, you could be your own person to have your own opinion on that. And do you have a similar idea as perhaps that was needed in those certain cities? I didn't think that was true. What would be your take on how they were used in American cities?
They've done it before in California before the last one. As you say, with the presidential power, he has that choice to activate guard units without the governor to actually approve it, and that's one of those things that's at a federal level. Again, that's not controlled by the state.
True. As we get a little bit further along here, I'm curious, are there some certain topics that we haven't touched on yet that really interest you on a political level in the state of Virginia? I've thought of education and the special election and stuff like that, the guard, gun rights. Are there other things that you would like to potentially address? Perhaps something like data centers, perhaps something like AI, whether that was a recently part of the bill, big, beautiful bills that you couldn't regulate from the state point AI for like 10 years. And I don't necessarily agree with that. But what would be your thoughts on some topics that we haven't touched on yet?
AI is being used more and more every day. The company I work for uses AI in the camera system to identify theft. And, there's certain things that AI is good for, certain things that it's not. It's a touchy subject, yes, but it's going to be more stuff being done with AI, especially in the background and, going forward. I can see data centers, yeah, that's a touchy subject too, because one, they require massive amount of power. You have to have, water to help cool these things. And that's a whole nother thing. I know here in Chesterfield County, we're supposed to get a nuclear fusion plant. When that will come, I'm not sure. They're actually working on that. That was approved from the Chesterfield County Board of Supervisors. That actually for us, for Virginians in Chesterfield County, that costs the taxpayers of Chesterfield County $0. It's being funded by a group of people to run that center. It's supposed to be about the size of a auditorium. So that's coming whenever that is. I'm not sure, but it's supposed to help out with the power grid. But currently right now with Virginia, we actually buy a lot of our power from out of state. We're not able to make enough power to run at peak demand. And that's documented where we're buying from, North Carolina or from West Virginia or from PA.
Now, I generally think we would agree that as years go by, we get more efficient and safe with the technology that we use. And because of that, we shouldn't necessarily have to worry too much about something like a 3 Mile Island or a Chernobyl type happening as we get better usage and better knowledge of that technology and get more and more efficient. So we shouldn't necessarily have to fear nuclear energy being expanded in Virginia, as long as it's kept the environmental aspects safe and how we store the waste. But that would be a great way to expand our energy capacity, coupled with stuff like offshore wind that is considered more clean than, say, natural gas or coal. I don't know if there's any bills on that going up, getting ready, but would you consider supporting an expansion beyond just like the nuclear fusion in your district, but other parts?
Well, I know there's a lot of talk about, the solar fields. The only thing with solar fields, we have the places now where we could easily put solar panels up on parking lots or on top of buildings that are very massive to help out with that, because they don't realize the impact it does on the environment when you have to level, 40, 50 acres of a forest just to put up, some panels to run. That definitely hurts the environment. And also hurting that will hurt, livestock that's out, that's free ranging, uh, your um, everything else that goes with that. Wildlife is impacted, and people that have own the land, they have to be compensated to that too. So it's a lot more involved than just hey, let's go ahead and clear this land. It's more environmental impacts on that.
I do want to put this comment up again. A great question from LPNB 2407. But this one is regarding healthcare. Did I miss healthcare? Actually, yes. We didn't specifically mention that just yet. Are there opportunities in Virginia to loosen occupational licensing to lower the barrier to entry for healthcare employees and make healthcare more accessible? Do you like ideas like that?
With that, there's always way to go around in that. And like I said, with the healthcare, I've got people I know in the healthcare field. The biggest thing I hear is the ones that are just like contractors that go in and do this, that they're not fully ready to be in that field, and they make some mistakes, which that drives up the price of healthcare when you have mistakes. But there's always healthcare, a lot of that, sadly with the Obamacare Act, it didn't make it affordable. It actually hurt some Virginians too, and the citizens of the United States. But I can see where one thing in the current healthcare with Virginia is the, I think it's the COVID plan that they have is for individuals who have to go through bariatric surgery. They have to go through a full 12 months and not miss a single day. If they miss one session in that 12-month period, they start back at day one to go through that. Me going through it, I've gone through the surgery myself, and it's life-changing. And that's one thing that I would look into to help, Virginians who are struggling that are on, state healthcare to be able to shorten that. My time was only for 90 days to go through it. Sometimes it's 60 days, but the state mandates it's 12 months to go through this whole program. If you miss 1 month, you start back at month one.
And I will admit that is something that seemingly became a hurt toward the states that the federal government decided to, over the next 10 years, dramatically reduce, otherwise known as cut, things like Medicaid, which would mean that Virginia, if they want to keep the exact same levels of insured, they'd have to pony up more of their own money in order to get stuff that was cut, even though I think the Trump administration recently proposed a rural healthcare initiative, which was like 10 to 12 billion. I don't know if that'll catch up enough for that, for our rural aspects of Virginia. Again, this will be where my political leaning comes up. I'm for Medicare for all, which means the state of Virginia wouldn't have to do any money toward healthcare because it would be completely federalized in that sense. But again, that is me. I'm running out of cool new topics to ask you, except for one I did look up because you mentioned energy and something came up regarding like the size of an auditorium, which made me think of a warehouse. And I remember reading in the source I'm looking at is NBC4 Washington, where they had mentioned an ICE mega detention center in Stafford County, Virginia, which was planning to hold thousands and thousands of people at the warehouse. And I'm like, to me, that just struck me as just a horrible image. But what do you think about the idea of stuff like that coming to Virginia, Stafford and other counties? Is that a good use of ICE funds? Would you support setting aside more buildings to do that? Or do you also, like me, just think the whole idea is kind of iffy?
With that, again, that's a federal issue. That's not a state issue. If the federal government does that, that's what they have. Again, with Virginia state legislature, we control what we have to do with our citizens in Virginia. If they get a place that's from the federal that they find, they pay for, that's the federal government doing their job. We're looking at what's best for our citizens in Virginia to take care of them, because you never know they're bringing people from out of the state to these places. That's all a federal thing. That's not a state issue.
To be fair, yes, that is a distinct. ICE is a federal organization, but there are some Virginia laws and local laws which would be whether or not we put up more assistance and help towards ICE, and perhaps you might have an opinion on such as that. Maybe like the idea of the city of Richmond deciding to not have its sheriff's office and local police forces help out with ICE. That could be a state issue with which you could take an opinion on, perhaps.
Yeah, with the as you know, with sheriffs, they're elected by the people. They are, for the people, where the police is ran differently with that. But as you know, with everything with that, it's a little touchy. I have a law enforcement background, so I can only speak for what I've done. I worked in law enforcement for the Department of Defense, which, as you know, is a federal, which is completely different. And this was during a different time frame during the 2000s, early 2000s.
Would you like to take this opportunity to just broaden a little bit about your history? Been over 45 minutes, so I think that's a good touch of the politics aspect of your race here. How about tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I've been in the county most of my life, besides when I worked for the government. When I worked for them, I worked for the Provost Marshal Office for Fort Lee. Then I left that and worked on the Sea-Based X-band Radar project with the Missile Defense Agency out in Alaska, out in Hawaii, and then out in the Bering Sea in the North Pacific. Had a bunch of training through Blackwater, USA. And then I've gotten my Glock Armor's license. So I was a certified Glock Armor. I've spent 25 and a half years in the grocery retail business. Worked at all the stores right around here within the district I work in. Still currently employed with them. Worked my way from bagger all the way up to an assistant manager. Been a acting store manager. Been on special projects, going and doing recovery work for other areas, for everything from tornado recovery to hurricane recovery to helping out for when other places have gone on strike up north with the company I work for. And still live with my parents. My dad, he's getting older. He's a combat vet from Vietnam. My brother is a Iraq war vet. They both have PTSD, and they've been, my brother was 3 tours in Iraq. Dad did 1 tour in Vietnam. Then we have plenty of service for military, law enforcement. My great uncle was a captain for Richmond PD, and then I actually had a family member spent 8 years in the House of Delegates in the 1940s. So there's that too in my family history. And then some of the other things is I'm active in the amateur radio community. I am a top class of license for amateur radio. I do volunteer to help out with exams and stuff. And, a couple other things with friends that I have that go out motorcycle riding and all that fun stuff.
Isn't LC Bird also quite good at football?
Yes, we were very good at football. I was in band, and when I graduated in 2001, we had one of the largest bands in the state. They actually had to make a new class of band because it only went up to 4A. They had to make a 5A because some of the bands that had over 250 people were in a different class, so they had to make a new class for our band when I graduated.
And my dad went to Verina. So a lot of my time growing up was visiting the Sandston area. So I know my way around Richmond a little bit.
Yes, I've been on Verina's football field quite a few times.
Yeah, must have been pretty fun. That's a lot of work people put into to do band. When I was in high school, I was watching them practice all the time. So I would imagine band is quite onerous in terms of really nailing the talent in order to do that. I think I want to give you the opportunity right now to sort of do like a closing pitch, like a elevator pitch of 3 minutes or so that you would like to say to just the viewer who might happen to be in that Chesterfield area, Virginia, city of Richmond area, Virginia, or just like if you were canvassing right now, what would be the close to make sure that they vote for Mr. John Thomas?
So, in closing, I'm John Thomas, the Republican candidate for Senate District 15. I'm here to make sure that our constitutional amendments are protected and we have fair representation in the state of Virginia, not just for one party, but all parties involved, for everyone from Libertarian to Democrat to Independent and Republican itself. That and make sure that we have our schools back in place and education starts to get back where we need to. Back in the blue, make sure that these schools have the officers to help, resources to keep that going and protect our students. At the end of the day, they are our future. And at the end of the day, I would love to have your support in running for Senate District 15. And hopefully we can make a win and help out the entire state of Virginia.
Well, Mr. John Thomas, I want to thank you for coming on to SchezzWho the night before the special election, telling us about why you're running, cool things on your mind to be a state senator and things that are important to you. I want to thank you again and just wish you luck tomorrow, and just make sure that you enjoyed it. Hope you have a great night, good sir.
You too, and congratulations on your candidacy too, Conrad, and look forward to what you're doing in the future.
Intriguing. Perhaps we'll have you on again to discuss any great, cool new topics, perhaps as a state senator.
We'd love to. You have a good night.
You have a great night, good sir. Now, this has been another great episode of SchezzWho, your top spot for politics here in Virginia. And I'm glad that I'm now up and over 200 subscribers. Definitely make sure that you subscribe to SchezzWho. You like videos like this. You comment here for questions, because that really grows the show. And I want to thank all you people who watched, all you people who have made comments, and share it around. And then we'll grow. And then you'll enjoy more great SchezzWho content. You have a great evening.